السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله الله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون. أما بعد، فأوصيكم إخوتي وأخواتي ونفسي أولا بتقوى الله وطاعته، كما قال الله عز وجل: يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. ثم أما بعد. We're here in the month of February. And one aspect of the month of February, perhaps the youth know it better than the adults, is that it's Black History Month. And so at schools, different places, it's talked about. And I had a person ask me, brother, isn't like for Muslims, we don't need to talk about Black History Month, right? I'm like, why not, akhi? He's like, isn't it bid'ah? I'm like, bro, what do you mean bid'ah? Bid'ah is in the religious affairs, is something, you make it something religious. He's like, yeah, but we have no racism, akhi. I'm like, yeah. Go ask somebody who maybe is feeling it. Maybe you don't feel it, you don't see it. You're not speaking to people who actually feel it or see it enough. Because it's definitely an issue in our community. And of course, Black History Month is something not from our tradition. Agreed. The Prophet ﷺ never had a month for women and a month for family and a month for blacks and a month for, Europeans or whatever it may be. He dealt with these issues systematically. He dealt with it through dealing with the heart, and we'll talk about it. But being here, living here, and people are talking about certain topics, for sure we should talk about it. It's an opportunity to reconnect, discuss these matters. And from a Western culture perspective, a lot of different topics to talk about. Well, they want to just keep bringing certain topics every year so that they can do something about it. I mean, okay, fine. Let's talk about it. So subhanallah, it's an opportunity for us also to see the contributions made by blacks. And why is this a problem? Well, because as they say, to the victors goes all the spoils, and also to the victors, they get to write history and shape people's minds. So for the last 300 years or so, who have been the victors in the world? Let's just say they're Europeans mostly. The Europeans have been the victors for the last 300 years. They have smashed Islam. They have smashed other societies. They have colonized almost every place that can be colonized. And with it, of course, is a very fundamentally racist mindset that the Europeans had. And that's why they're still struggling with it. Colonization to them was, we are bringing civilization to the barbarians, to people who are subhuman. And they actually really believe that, or they try to sell that, to justify their horrendous crimes and their genocide to the places they colonized. And that mindset, unfortunately, still exists today, brothers and sisters, and still being used as we continue to talk about Israel and Palestine. That mindset that somebody else is less than me, and that somebody else is not even human, and that dehumanization comes from racist mindsets. As we all see how many of the Israeli officials, we're not even talking about just a few racist people, but Israeli officials talking about Palestinians as, human animals, or that they need to be, exterminated, subhanallah. And so this mindset was, subhanallah, also spread and outsourced. And so when the Muslim lands and different lands were colonized, racism was also brought to those lands. And purposefully certain people, depending on their ethnicity or color, were sometimes put in power. And racism became even more prevalent. And many conflicts in those lands that are colonized also happened due to racism. Of course, we know the old adage, divide and conquer. They had to make sure the people they conquered were divided. So how do you divide them? Well, use many means. And of course, racism was a means to divide the people within the lands they conquered. That wasn't enough. They divided Muslims based on schools of thought. You're Hanafi, you're Shafi'i, you're Maliki, you're this, you're that, bang. Hatred. Divide based on language. Divide based on, tribe. The more you can divide the people you are colonizing, the easier it is to colonize. And the less likely they would to galvanize together and uprise. So racism was also used as a weapon to colonize us, subhanallah. And many of us and our parents and our grandparents come from those colonized lands. And we have some of that impact still, subhanallah. We also know that when a people are subjugated and they're just trying to put ends meet, come up with the ends meet, and just survive, it's harder for them to thrive. So while the Europeans had the resources and the power to go around, they had the opportunities to do research and development, sit around and, continue to produce. While most other places, most other lands that were colonized, people are just trying to survive, trying to work hard to just get their rights, to get their lands back. And so it becomes very hard for those generations to really be able to produce in terms of science and technology and different things. But in spite of that, of course, people have produced. It's also an opportunity for us, of course, living here, to reflect a little bit about the transatlantic slave trade. The horrendous time from the 1500s to the 1800s, roughly 300 years of brutal enslavement, subhanallah, of our African brothers and sisters. And I say African brothers and sisters, not just from humanity, but also from Islam. Perhaps many people are unaware that different estimates of how many of those who were enslaved were actually Muslim. Different estimates from 20 to 40% of those who were enslaved in the transatlantic trade were actually Muslims. How many over those 300 years were enslaved? Estimates at 12.5 million people, subhanallah. 12.5 million people enslaved. That does not include those who were killed as they were hunted like animals. That does not include those who were put on ships for weeks and months, who died on the journey as they were shackled like animals. Brutality to the extreme only can be justified by dehumanization and taking them as literally animals to be used. 300 years, subhanallah. Until 1865, officially, when the amendment for abolishing slavery was passed in the US. But we know that the situation did not stop in 1865. That the people, the black African Americans, continued to struggle to have basic rights for over 100 years after that. And they still continue to struggle with, subhanallah, systemic racism and brutality from different places, subhanallah. And someone will say, but brother, didn't Muslims also have slavery? Doesn't Islam also allow slavery? You are misunderstanding history and definitions. And be careful, because sometimes we use the same word, but we may mean different things. You see, Islam came to bring humanity up. Bring men, women, children, slaves, free people, everybody. Give them higher status amongst each other. And the rule, subhanallah, when it deals to how to treat those who are enslaved in Islam, if you describe it to somebody, just ask someone, non-Muslim, say, look, I'll tell you this. Somebody who has to eat the same food as your family, you have to feed them the same food as your family. Somebody you have to give the same clothing as your family. Somebody you got to take care of their sleeping arrangements fully, like you would with your own family. And someone who you cannot overwork, and they have rights not to be overworked. What do you call such a person? They would never say a slave. I mean, that sounds like a family member. That sounds like a beautiful relationship of someone who is being treated well. All issues taken care of. Oh, and we're not done there. That person wants their freedom. They can seek mukataba, a contract where they can free themselves. And that becomes a very strongly encouraged thing to do, mentioned in the Quran, that those who seek mukataba, give them mukataba, which is a contract that they work certain hours, fulfill certain things above and beyond the basics to free themselves, and that they should be freed. And not only that, many acts in Islam to expiate the sin. Go free a people. If you have this mistake you've made, go free someone. You have this mistake committed, go free someone. One of the greatest things is to free people. Why all of this? Why not? The person will ask, I get asked these questions. Why did Islam not just come and abolish slavery? Because the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Analyze it a little bit. See how if slavery was just shut down immediately, closed, what would happen to all these people who were quote unquote slaves? And by the way, I tell my students, don't use the word slavery. It's indentured servitude. Because it is in debt until they serve their time. Person who is in debt until they serve their time. And You can't just go around enslaving people. Only through certain rules of war. And it's a means not to fill the jails with people, but to give people the right to do their time, inshallah, and get their freedom. And to just abolish it right away, what are you going to do with all these people in society? How are you going to integrate them properly? They'll be on the streets. They'll be in ghettos. They'll be committing crimes. They'll be, at a disadvantage. They'll be what we see in the US and other places. So Islam took it step at a time to deal with issue in the society. First dignifying such people and then allowing for them to be freed over time. So don't compare the situation. And subhanAllah, as we go, and we very few minutes left here, in terms of going back to the race issue and the racist mentalities that some of us have. When I tell this to some people, they get shocked. I say, do you know that there are many Sahaba and Sahabiyat who are black? They say, yeah. We know Bilal al-Habashi. But who else was black? Can you tell me? How about Ayman? The one who fed the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the one who said, she is my mother after my mother, who was the caretaker who the Prophet ﷺ loved very much. She was of African descent, black woman. Oh, I didn't know that. Do you know that the second wife of the Prophet ﷺ, after Khadijah had passed away, was none other than Suwayda, Sauda bint Za'ma, also known as Barakah. The Prophet ﷺ married her, and she was of black African descent, and she was the Prophet's wife for some time. He had no other wife except her, and he kept her until he died. He was his wife all the way through. Subhanallah, the wife of the Prophet ﷺ is black. I didn't know that. Wow, that's crazy. Let's keep going. The first martyr in Islam, Sumayya radiallahu anha, she was of African descent. She was black. Her son Zayd, whom the Prophet Ammar bin Yasir, Ammar bin Yasir, her son was also black. Oh man, I didn't know that. Who else? Usama bin Zayd radiallahu an, whom the Prophet ﷺ put as the Amir of the last army before he passed away. His father Zayd was married to an African woman, and Usama was born from that marriage, and he was black. Wow, subhanallah. Julaybib is a beautiful story, and I'm telling you quickly the story to see how the Prophet ﷺ did not just end slavery and racism with his tongue, but with his conduct. When he came to Medina, and Julaybib was from the Ansar, he loved Julaybib because he was a young man that was so committed to Islam. And he had beautiful conduct and character. And the Prophet ﷺ asked Julaybib, who was of African descent, why aren't you married? Why don't you get married? He says, Ya Rasulullah, no one's going to give their daughter to Julaybib. He said, why not? He said, people don't see me as handsome or capable. He says, La, by Allah, you're an amazing Muslim with beautiful conduct. And the Prophet ﷺ went to one of the houses, rich house, the beautiful daughter. He says, are you okay to marry her? He said, Ya Rasulullah, how can I marry her? She's of great status, and everybody would want to marry her. He says, okay, I will go and propose on your behalf. So he goes, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, knocks on the door, speaks to the parents, and says, I'm here to propose to your daughter. And they are excited. They think the Prophet ﷺ is here to propose for himself. He says, no, not for me. Oh, well, who is it for? Somebody you recommend. Great. He says, for Julaybib. And their face changes. Oh, Julaybib. We'll get back to you on that one. And they didn't give a response to the Prophet. The Prophet leaves. And the wife, or the daughter, she overhears her parents arguing. Do we give her or not? What do we do? This is big trouble here. She hears this. She comes and she says, oh, mom and dad, how can I refuse someone the Prophet ﷺ recommends? If he recommends him, he must be amazing. And I don't care about anything else. I accept and I want to marry him. And the Prophet ﷺ does the nikah of Julaybib with this girl who is beautiful from a beautiful family. And very short time later, subhanallah, Julaybib goes to the battle of Uhud. And he is martyred in the battle of Uhud. And the Prophet ﷺ sees Julaybib and he is burying him. And he is crying, holding Julaybib in his hand. And he says out loud so everybody can hear. He says, Julaybib minni wa ana min. Julaybib is from me. Like you say this to somebody who's your son or daughter. Julaybib minni, he is from me. And I am from him. To make it very clear, this racism, pre-Islamic racism in Arabia is shut. This man who you consider black is from me and I am from him. I'm the one who got him married. He is a righteous man and he was a martyr of Uhud. Allahu Akbar, what an honor. And just a side note, what an honor for the sister as well for accepting this, because we know that she would be with him in the highest place of Jannah as a wife of a martyr. MashaAllah. We'll stop here and we'll continue inshallah the last couple of minutes to wrap it up. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Allah, we need more time to talk about this topic, very deep, important topic that affects the community very much. And if you think we don't have a race problem, wallahi, unfortunately, many people do. And those who do come speak about it with a lot of passion because of what they've gone through. And so, brothers and sisters, this racism is coming from us. Sometimes brothers complain about racism in the masjid. That certain people don't say salam to me because of my complexion. I see them say salam to strangers. I know they're strange. He doesn't know who they are, but he doesn't say it to me. And it hurts, wallahi. Subhanallah. We all know, wallahi, we can quote the ayats about racism. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا. We all know this ayah. We teach it to our kids. We've created you from different nations and tribes, men and women, so that you may know each other, not discriminate against each other. And who is the best of you? Allah says the best of you are those, the most noble of you are those who have the most piety. Not your background or color or language. None of that matters. It's your taqwa. And the Prophet ﷺ in a hadith, we know this hadith also, because this was his farewell speech. Can you imagine? The last khutbah he gives in the Hajj al-Wada'. He is leaving. He says this is known as the farewell speech. And the end of the khutbah, the last thing he says in the khutbah, he says, أَلَا إِنَّ أَبَاكُمْ وَاحِدٌ وَإِنَّ رَبَّكُمْ وَاحِدٌ. Your Father is one, your Lord is one. And then he says, أَلَا لَا فَرْقَ لِعَرَبِيٍّ عَلَى أَعْجَمِيٍّ وَلَا أَعْجَمِيٍّ عَلَى عَرَبِيٍّ. There is no honor. There is no preference. Fadl, preference and honor for an Arab over a non-Arab or non-Arab over an Arab. وَلَا لِأَبْيَضَ عَلَى أَسْوَدْ وَلَا أَسْوَدْ عَلى أَبْيَض. He makes it very clear. No honor for a black over a white or a white over a black. إِلَّا بِالتَّقْوَى, except with piety. And then after this statement, he says, أَلَا قَدْ بَلَّغْتُ. He tells people, did I not give you the message of Islam? This is the end of his speech. It's at the end. He says, did I not give you the message of Islam? They say, Bala ya Rasulullah, ballaght. Indeed, you have given us the message of Islam. Brothers and sisters, when we know this message, then how do we keep racism in our hearts? It's a disease of the heart. It is what made Shaitan, Iblis, become cursed. Because he thought he was better than Adam. You have nothing to do with your language or background or race, unless you learn the language, alhamdulillah. But Allah created you, put you in that circumstance. How could you think you're better than someone else? And how do you speak in a derogatory way about someone else? And brothers and sisters, wallahi, you are role models for your students, for your children. They hear you in the house saying something negative or derogatory, they'll take it with them to school. One person, suspended a few years ago, student. He says, I went home and told my mom what happened. She laughed. Subhanallah. We have to watch our tongue. We have to make sure we do not tolerate anything derogatory or negative in our homes. And of course, we're the first role models and teachers for our students. So let's make sure we get that out of our hearts. As it's a major sin. Wallahi, it's not even a small sin. It's a major, major sin. Let's be role models like the Prophet ﷺ who dealt with it systematically. Let's deal with it at least systematically at home. And may Allah help us establish communities and societies that are role models where this problem is gone. Ameen. Allahumma atina fi dunya hasana. وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات إنك قريب سميع مجيب الدعوات وصل اللهم وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين وأقم الصلاة.
Assalamu alaikum. Brothers, forward. Please move forward. Take a step. Please move forward. There is a lot of brothers are standing outside. Please move forward and fill the gaps. Don't wait for other brother that they will fill the gap. Please move forward. His humble request, move to your right side. Those brothers who are on near to gate, please move to your right or left side. There is a lot of brothers are waiting outside in cold weather. Please move outside. Please move to your right side. And those brothers who pray on hardwood, please follow yellow tape. There is a yellow spots on your feet. Please check them. So your line will automatically straight. Please move forward.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
قل لا إله إلا الله استوعتوا للصلاة رحمكم الله. Please straighten your lines. Please complete the line ahead of you first if you see any gaps. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا يسخر قوم من قوم عسى أن يكونوا خيرا منهم ولا نساء من نساء عسى أن يكن خيرا منهن ولا تلمزوا أنفسكم ولا تنابزوا بالألقاب بئس الاسم الفسوق بعد الإيمان ومن لم يتب فأولئك هم الظالمون. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اجتنبوا كثيرا من الظن إن بعض الظن إثم ولا تجسسوا ولا يغتب بعضكم بعضا أيحب أحدكم أن يأكل لحم أخيه ميتا فكرهتموه واتقوا الله إن الله تواب رحيم. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Inshallah, immediate homework. Please say salam to somebody you don't know before you leave the masjid, inshallah.